Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial for the new Boston. Now, in this Ajax series, we've already looked at using the XML HTTP variables we've been using, and we've been posting data to our page using the get method. So we've been picking data up in our include file using $_get. Now, what if we want to send post data through to another file? So we're going to do exactly the same format as we've done before, but this time we're going to create a little program, or script rather, that allows us to have an input box on the page and a submit button. Now, when the user clicks this submit button, we're going to be transferred, obviously using Ajax, to update.inc.php. And what this is going to do is it's going to insert a piece of data, if you like, into the database. So let's first of all have a look at the database structure and what we're actually going to be doing here. So ID, we can ignore this for now. This is a primary key and it's auto increment. So if you're following along this tutorial and you want to create this table, we've got the database called Ajax, the table called data, and inside of this we've got the ID and data field. So ID, like I just said, it's an integer data type, it's the primary key, and we've got an auto increment. So for every insert we make to this thing, for every record we create, this is going to be an auto incrementing value. If you've watched my other tutorials on databases, you'll understand what this is. If not, go back and have a look at them. So data is just simply going to be the just a string of data. It will literally just be a string of data. So this example is just going to demonstrate how to input something onto there, and then hopefully you can come away from this knowing how to use this post method through Ajax, and you can incorporate this into your own website with posting data. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is design our form. So let's go back over to our index.php file, and we'll start to create a rough outline of our page. So here we've got our root HTML tags, then our head tag, and then our body tag. So inside head, we're going to be putting the function that's actually going to update the database. Well, it's going to call Ajax and then post the data to this update.inc.php. So we're going to transfer data from the form to this function, or call this function, which is going to pick up this specific field on the form using the get element by ID in JavaScript, and then we're going to get the value of that form and submit it through. So that's just a rough outline of what we're going to be doing. So first of all, we're just going to create an area where we will eventually write our Ajax into. So we've got script type, and we'll end the script there. Remember, the type is text JavaScript because Ajax is essentially JavaScript and XML. So inside of our body, what do we need to do? Well, the first thing I'm going to do is just simply create a label. So I'm going to say insert. So I'm going to say insert, and then I'm going to create an input field with a type text. The name of this is going to be, let's call it insert text. In fact, we'll just call it text for now. That will keep things simple. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to create a button. So let's create an input type button. We'll give this a value of submit, and we'll want to say on click equals, and we want to call a function name. Now the function name will be inside here, which will then process this update.inc.php using Ajax. So I'm going to call the function, let's say insert. Okay, so we've called this insert function, which obviously at the moment doesn't exist. So let's create that now. Okay, so just to give you an idea of what this program, how this is going to work, what we're going to do is we're going to make an alert quickly, just to check that this function is being called properly. So I'm just going to write OK in there. So let's go back to preview our HTML. So we've got insert, and we've got a text value here that we can type in. So we can type a value into here and then click submit, and it should be alerted by calling this function. So let's just type in test, click submit, and we get OK back. Now let's try and access this this value here, this text value here. So I'm going to say we'll just create a new variable called let's say text value, and that's going to equal get element by ID, and that is text dot value. Now we can alert text value. Okay, so we're just using get element by ID and then we're putting value on the end. So let's just test if that works. Let's refresh. We'll type in test, click submit, and it's not working. So let's go back and see what we might be doing wrong. Perhaps if we change the value of this, so I could say insert text, say insert text dot value. Let's refresh that, type in test, click submit, no, nothing. Okay, let's try var, and let's try and refresh, test, submit, no. Oh, I think I can see the problem. We need to change this to ID as opposed to name because we're getting element by ID. So let's change this back to text just to keep things simple. And we can also change that back to text there, and we can remove that. We don't need to declare it as a variable. So let's try and refresh and see if this works. Hopefully it does, then we can proceed with our code. No, it hasn't. So let's just go back to how we were. So ID insert text and insert text. Okay, so let's come and refresh, test, no. Okay, well I can see the problem. I need document.getElement by ID, obviously. So now this is fixed. Let's go and preview this in our browser. So I'm going to type test in here, click on submit, and nothing's working. This is annoying. Insert text. Let's change this back to name because I think that might be the problem now. Let's refresh. Test. No. So document.getElementID.value, insert text, name, get rid of that, and let's change. Let's see if that works. Nope. Okay, so maybe this to ID. Let's refresh, A or W or something. Okay, so right, I wish I was better at JavaScript, but I'm really not, so please forgive me for that. Okay, so there's probably lots of you screaming at the screen at that point, telling me what I was doing wrong. So now we've tested our value, we know how to get our value. Eventually, we've got this element by ID insert text. I'm actually going to change this back to text now because I'm going to keep things simple for the purposes of the tutorial. So again, whatever we type in here, we just display to the screen in the text box. For now, that's just for testing purposes. So let's get rid of that. After all that hard work, let's get rid of it. Okay, so now let's go into creating our Ajax itself. So the first thing we want to do is we want to say, let's come in here and say if window dot, and we basically need to specify for different types of browsers which method we're going to use to create our XML HTTP variable, or rather what we're going to set it to. So we say if window.xml HTTP request, and then we come down and we do something if that's true. Otherwise, we do something if that's false. So what would we do if it's true? Well, we set a variable called XML HTTP equal to a new XML HTTP request. So essentially what we're doing is we're checking for this first inside the window, and then we're creating it if it's true. So that's just for different browser support. Otherwise, we want to say XML HTTP equals new, and we want to create a new ActiveX object. And the parameter that's that we put into here is Microsoft.xml_http. Now bear in mind while I'm writing this code that everything I'm writing is case sensitive. So for example, this XML HTTP request object is in capitals for XML, and then a capital H, small TTP, a capital R, and then the rest of request is small. So ensure that for everything you write inside of here, it's bear in mind that it's case sensitive. So if you ended up with it not working, just double check the case next to what I've done. So now we need to check for a state change or a ready state change from our XML HTTP object. So we say XML HTTP dot on ready state change, and then we equal this to a function. So so basically based on this event we create a new function, and then inside here we can start checking our ready state and our status of our request. So we say if, and we say XML HTTP dot ready state, and remember our capital S here, so case sensitive, is equal to 4, and our XML HTTP dot status is equal to 200. This just means if the page is not blank, or the request isn't blank, I mean, then we complete the rest of this block. So if these are both true, then we create what's in here. So now under our insert field, if you like, here we're typing our the value that we want to insert into our database. We're going to create a div, and what this div is going to do is it's going to feed back the information from our update.inc.php file when we create it. And the reason for this is when we've inserted the data, we're going to tell the user that the data has been inserted. But because we're doing this without refreshing the page, we want to give a confirmation message inside a div. So I'm going to call this div. I've created the structure for the div here. We don't need to put anything in here at the moment, well, at all. I'm going to call the div message. So this is just going to feed back information from our request, our Ajax request, and the output in update.inc.php is going to be put into this div. So hopefully that makes sense. Otherwise, continue to follow along and see what you think. So we've got document .get element by ID, what I struggled with earlier, and then we specify the name of the div. So in this case, it's message. And then what we do is we say inner HTML. And what this is going to do is it's going to set the HTML within this specific div that we've specified. So what we're going to do is I'm going to equal this to XML HTTP dot response text. And all this basically is it's the output sent back from update.inc.php, because we're going to be opening this file later and sending post data to it, and we're going to be taking back the response text from this file. So that's important that we put that into message in order to, let's say if we were to say echo failed at any point in our program, the any time in our script, the message div would be updated. So now that we've done that, we can come down here and we can start to send our post data. Now if you watch the other tutorials, you'll see that we've used XML HTTP.open, and then we've supplied 3 parameters. Don't forget the semicolon at the end. We've supplied the first parameter was get, the next was the file, so this was update.inc.php, and then it was true because we're sending the data asynchronously, so we need to set this to true. It's actually true by default, but I tend to put it in anyway just to ensure that it's there, etc, 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 just for my own peace of mind. So now we say XML HTTP.send. Now there's a few changes that we need to make when we're using post data. You'll see that in some of the other tutorials I've put question mark here to specify that we're going to be sending get data, and I've sent some specific data. So I've said, for example, text equals hello. Okay, so what I've done there is I've sent get data because it's as part of the URL. So let's go ahead and test this so we can see that everything's working with regards to the Ajax. So at the moment, what this Ajax will do is it will open this update.inc.php file, and it will pass through a variable called text, which is a get variable with the value hello. So what we can do inside here is just echo out $_get text, and what that should do is it should re-echo what we've entered into the text box, because remember, what we enter into the text box is being picked up. Sorry, let's go back here. What we enter into the text box will be picked up eventually by this. So this will equal hello just for now, and it will put that into our message div down here, as I explained earlier. So let's go ahead and check that this works. Let's click submit, and you can see that the value hello has been returned. Now, obviously the problem with this at the moment is we've completely avoided the point of the tutorial. We need to post data using post. So the first thing I'm going to do is change this to post, and I'm going to get rid of these variables on the end here, because we don't post data through the URL. Instead, we need to add an extra line underneath here. And basically what this line is going to do is it's going to set a request header, and we're going to alter the content type of when we submit. So let's go ahead and write this out. So we're going to say XML HTTP dot set request header. So it's almost like the header function in PHP, but this time what we're doing is we're specifying two parameters. For the first one, we're saying content type, and then we're setting the content type in here, and this is application /x www, and then it's a hyphen again, we're going to say form hyphen URL encoded. Okay, so this is basically saying we're sending form data through as a post, and we've specified post here, remember. Now, this isn't actually going to work as it stands, because we need to predefine some parameters that we want to send. And remember, the parameter that we want to send is the value of this text here. So let's go ahead and create a variable called parameters, and we're going to equal that to something, and then we're going to append something on the end. And the something here is what we want to be read as the post variable name. So I'm going to say this is text, and then I'm going to say that's equal to something. So what we can actually do is we can actually set this now to hello, for example, and we need to send these parameters through. Now, this looks like get data by saying text equals hello. We can also say and something equals hello too, or something like that. You know, we can send limited post variables through here. However, now we need to find a way to send these parameters through to our update.inc.php, because at the moment we've just put them into a variable. What we need to do is we need to actually put it into the argument of this send function here. So we're going to say parameters in there. So what this is going to do now is it's going to open this update.inc.php file ready to post data. We're changing the content type of the page so we can submit the post data successfully, and then we're sending the parameters through to the page, and that's about it. That should work. So because I've specified this post data as hello, the post variable name is text and the value is hello, all we need to do now is change this to post, and you can see that we would have posted this value through as post data. So hopefully this works. Let's click on submit, and you can see we've got hello. So now what we've done is we've achieved the whole point of the tutorial, and we've posted some data through using the post method. But obviously that's not good enough. What we're going to do is we're going to specify this to be the value of our text box here, so our text input type here. So we're going to say document.get element by ID, that thing I struggled with so much earlier, and we're going to say text, and then we're going to say dot value. So remember what we, oh no, we don't need the parentheses. So remember what we essentially echoed out earlier. So now what should happen is we should get this element by ID, which is text down here. We should grab the value of it and post it through to our update.inc.php. So it's a bit more dynamic now, so we can test the well, how dynamic this is. Let's just type in my name and click submit, and nothing's happened. Surprise, surprise, surprise. Okay, so the problem here is that I'm still in the frame of mind with PHP. I need to start remembering we're coding in JavaScript now, so we're going to put a plus to append and not a dot. That's why it wasn't working. So let's go back to our page and refresh. I'm going to type my name as I once did before, click submit, and we've posted this data through successfully. So whatever we type in here and we click submit is going to be posted through to our update.inc.php. So now in update.inc.php we need to start connecting to our database in order to start putting the data into this data field inside of our table. So let's just refresh the page so we can start again in a minute. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is connect to our database. There's other videos on connecting to the database. This isn't the greatest way to do it. We may retrieve errors, etc, etc, etc. So refer back to my older videos or other videos to have a look. So this takes three parameters. We need the host, obviously. We need the username and we need the password, which for me is just blank at the moment. And then we need to select our database. So we've connected to our MySQL server. Now we're selecting our database, and this is called Ajax. So if we go back over to our MySQL, PHP MyAdmin, our database is called Ajax. Now what we need to do is check if this post variable called text has been set. So we need to say if, and we use the isSet here, and we say if isSet post text do something, and this something is going to be, just for now, echo out OK, just to check that everything's working. So let's go back here and type in Alex and click submit, and we get an OK back here, so we know that this value has been set. So now we can put it into its own variable so we can use it a bit better later. So we're going to say text equals $_post text. That just saves us writing out this $_post text again and again. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to check if this equals a value. So we don't want to be inserting empty values into our database. We want to be entering at least some text. So I'm going to say if not empty, and we're going to say text. So we're referencing text into here. And if not empty text, we do something else. I'm going to echo out. Remember, we're echoing out whatever output we get from this update.inc.page. We're outputting it into our message div down here. So we can give error messages to the user and it will pop up without refreshing the page. This is the whole point of Ajax. It gives you things a lot quicker and without refreshing the page, so it's a lot easier to deal with. So we can say please type something, for example. So let's just go ahead and echo out OK here, just so we know what we're doing. And let's go ahead and submit nothing. Okay, so it says please type something. Now let's insert type Alex, click submit, OK. So we know that that's working, that's great. Now we can start constructing our query to insert this data into the database and then check whether the query was successful or not. So let's start constructing the query. This is quite simple. I have tutorials on this as well, so go back and refer to them if you're stuck on this bit. We're going to say insert into, and now we choose the table name. So if we go back to PHP MyAdmin, we can see the table name is data. So we're inserting into this data table, and then we say values, and inside of parentheses we're going to supply the amount of values and the values that we want to input. So we're going to say two values, so we've got 2 bits of string data here if you like. The first one is an ID and it's an auto increment, so we don't need to specify a value, we can keep this blank. What that will do is the database will automatically update it to the next number in line in the increment. But in here, what we need to do is specify this text here. Now we do need to add some level of security, so we need to add, we need to basically escape from this string here and append on this text variable, and then we need to append on the rest of the string. Now what we can do is we can use the MySQL real escape string function and enclose that text in that. And the reason we do this is because SQL injection is possible whenever we're allowing a dynamic user input going into a query can always result potentially in SQL injection. So now we're going to say query underscore run equals MySQL query, and then obviously the query string inside of there. So let's just add this into an if statement so we can check if it's worked. So if query run equals MySQL query, what's going to happen here, is this is going to return true if the query was a success. So we can say in here success, else we can say failed. So let's echo failed. Oh, not in capitals, it's a bit rude. So failed, and then otherwise here we can say echo data inserted, for example. Okay, so now let's run back to our browser and test this out. So as it stands inside our database, we've got no values in here. So MySQL returned an empty result set, i.e. 0 rows. So we've got nothing in our database at the moment, or in our table rather. So now I'm just going to pop my name in there and I'm going to click submit. So it says data inserted, so now I can presume that the data has been inserted into the database. Let's go in and let's click on browse, and you can see that it has in fact inserted this data. Let's go ahead and type something else, so we'll type Dale and click submit, and we get the same message back again. It hasn't changed, so I presumed that has just re-given me the data inserted echo, and yeah, it's inserted more data. So now we can start to insert different data and whatever we want. So there's not really much point to this application itself, but hopefully from this tutorial you can go away with your knowledge now of the post data, or posting data using Ajax as opposed to using get data, and you can apply it to your own uses. So we've gone through the Ajax stage of things, we've gone through the HTML and the div, and we've also, more importantly, gone through the PHP and how we can combine that with Ajax and taking our post variable in order to post a value to the database, or insert a value into a database. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video tutorial created for the New Boston. Now in this tutorial I'm going to be talking about exception handling. Now exception handling is a different way to handle errors in PHP that your program might output, and it's used to change the flow of your program, usually to save the current state of the program while you throw the error. And there's loads and loads of different ways to do that, but before we get into it, the different parts of this tutorial and parts relative to exception handling, we'll go through different ways, and you'll eventually try and understand how it helps. I'm not going to do too much explaining for now, but meanwhile follow along my example, test out the code, and try and work out for yourself how this is best worked out and where you should best use it. So I'm going to create an example, and this is going to be a function that's dividing by a number, so dividing two numbers. So let's set the skeleton up for our function. It's just basically function divide, and then we're going to supply it with two arguments, so it's num1 and num2. Now with division by 0, we need to incorporate this into our function to ensure that division by 0 doesn't occur. Now num2 cannot be 0, num1 can be 0, because when we divide 0 by 0, let's just bring up a calculator actually. So let's say we've got 0 divided by 10 is 0, so that's absolutely fine, that operation is completed. Now what about 10 divided by 0? Cannot divide by 0. So num1 can't equal 0 at any point in this function when we call it with the parameters the arguments put in. So we first of all need to create an if statement to say if num2 is equal to 0, then we need to do something, else we need to echo, no we don't, we need to return, num1 divided by num2. So let's test out the divide function we've just created. So we're going to echo out divide, and we're going to say 10 and 5, for example. So 10 divided by 5 is 2, so we should return this operation because num2 does not equal 0. So let's come and refresh, and you can see that we've been returned with the value 2. So now what happens if we supply it with 0? Let's go back here and supply this form with 0 and refresh. So obviously nothing's happening at the moment because inside our block nothing's happening, but or there's no code inside our block. But what happens if we want to throw a new exception? So this is the simplest way to throw an exception. We want to say throw new exception, and in here we can specify a custom error message that's going to be sent through with the error. So cannot divide by 0. Now, why do we use exception handling, and why do we throw new exceptions? Now, the reason is we usually, in this case, do it to substitute the error message. We give an error out, but we don't use the default PHP error message. We don't want to do that because we don't want to show it to our users in the way that we've created a PHP error. That's just one way that we might use to do this. So let's go back here and press refresh and see the difference in error we've got. So here we've got uncaught exception with message cannot divide by 0 in this file, and it gives us a host of other information as well and tells us where it's thrown. So it's thrown on line 5, which is here, that we're on here now. So this is a basic idea of throwing an exception. Now the reason we're returning a fatal error, we are returning a fatal error, is because we don't have a block to catch this exception. And to do this we use a try, throw and catch statement. I'm not going to explain this in this example, but we're going to do that in the next video, and this is going to allow us to make things a bit more custom. So for now we've thrown an exception without a catch, so we've been given a fatal error which looks like this in the browser, but later on we're going to work with the try, throw and catch to make everything flow just a little bit better. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this video is for the new Boston. Now, the next part of exception handling we're going to talk about is try, throw and catch. Now, what we do with try, throw and catch is we need to try a block of code. Within this code, if we come across an error, we throw an exception, as we've already looked at. But what we do is that we then catch the exception and we can display the custom error message in our own way. So, to start this, we say try, we open a new block, and then afterwards we say catch, and we have a new block. We've got two parentheses here which pick up the exception and give it a variable name. So for example, exception EX. So what's going to happen now is we're going to try some code in here, and if we do need to throw an exception, the exception will be caught by here, and the exception will be named EX. What we can then do is from EX we can get the message that has been predefined in the after when we throw an exception. So if you're having trouble understanding this, we'll go ahead and write the code, and then we'll understand it a bit later on, hopefully. So what do I want to try? Now I need to think of a scenario that I can try in order to throw an error. So for example, if my age here I set was 16, let's say in the UK you have to be over 18 to drink alcohol. Let's try and we're going to create an if statement, and we'll try this block of code. So if age is greater than 18, we need to say that's fine, you're old enough. So we can say echo, just say old enough. Otherwise, we want to throw a new exception. So we need to throw new exception, as we did in the last example, and we can supply text. So we can say not old enough. So we try this block of code. Let's just indent it so it looks a bit neater. We try this block of code, and the block of code says if the age is greater than 18, then we can display to the user, yes, you're old enough, that's fine. Now otherwise we're going to throw a new exception, and the exception text, or the message if you like, is not old enough. Now because we've thrown a new exception at this part, we can catch it with this part. And to catch, or not to catch, sorry, because that's already been done, but to display your custom error message, we want to echo out, and let's just say error, colon, and we're going to append on the variable ex. Now from the variable ex we need to call the function that's within throwing a new exception, which is going to echo out this text here. So we need to say ex hyphen greater than sign get message. Oh. Now I haven't written this function myself anywhere. This is just standard notation for getting the message here that's thrown by a new exception. So now you can already see we've come up with a way of throwing an exception and giving ourselves a custom error message here. And you can throw multiple exceptions, which can be caught multiple times as well. So eventually it's going to create a lot better flowing code. For now it does seem a bit sort of pointless to use, but we can go ahead with refreshing the page and looking at the example anyway. So let's put our age older than 18 for now. We'll put it to 21. So let's refresh, and it says old enough. So we've got the output that we're expecting. Now let's type 16, and we can see what happens. Let's press refresh, and you can see that we've got this error that we wrote in here, and then we've grabbed the error message from when we've thrown our new exception. So what we've successfully done is created a try, throw and catch method to our program to try a block of code. If something goes wrong, or if something's not right, a value's not hasn't been compared, or we have an else, we're going to throw a new exception, and then we're going to catch that exception and display the custom error message to the user. So that is try, throw and catch in exception handling with PHP. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and I'm back with another video created for the new Boston. Now in this exception handling video we're going to look at throwing more than one, or catching rather, sorry, more than one exception that might be thrown. So we're throwing more than one exception and we're catching more than one exception, and we're going to give these exceptions our own name. So I'm going to use an example of connecting to a MySQL database. You probably already know that to connect to a MySQL database you use MySQL connect. You then specify the server name, the server name, the username, and then the password. And then we're also going to incorporate this select database function, MySQL select database, in which we just specify the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is create some of our variables that we're going to be using within these functions, just to keep the code clean and easily modifiable. So the MySQL server, in my case, is localhost. The MySQL user, I'm going to say host actually, it's a bit easier. So host is localhost, the user is root, and the password in my case is unspecified. I don't actually have a password linked to this root account. So now I can specify the database, so MySQL DB, and that is equal to a_database. This database does exist within my table. So when I use when I test out these exception handlers, I'm going to change root to Alex so we don't connect properly to our server. And then for database I'm just going to append a 1 on the end, just so that gives us an error about our database as well. So how do we go about redefining or renaming these exceptions? Now we do this by creating an extension of a class that already exists, and the class is exception. So what we need to do is we need to create a new class. We need to say class and give it a class name. So for the database exception, I'm going to call it database exception with just a capital D and a capital E. And this is going to extend, so we use the extend keyword, exception. And then we just put two brackets there. We don't need to specify anything in here at all. So what we're doing is we're taking exception and we're extending this into our own class called database exception. So we're basically taking everything from exception and using that in our own class called database exception. And I'm going to copy and paste this code down. In fact, we'll write it out again. So I'm going to say class server exception, and that's also going to extend exception, and then we just do two curly brackets there. So I'll put this one at the top because we're going to be connecting our database first, then we're going to be our server first, then we're going to select our database. So let's set up our try and catch block, but this time we can add another catch on the end. So we've got two catches in our try and catch. So what do we put inside each of these? Well, we just say exception. No, we don't. We say catch server extension, and we'll call this EX. And then we exception, and then we say catch database exception EX as well. And in here we can echo out error messages specific to each exception thrown. So what we can now do with this server exception and database exception, is we can throw these inside our block. So the first thing to do is set up an if statement. We're going to say if we can't connect, and we're going to silence this, so we're not going to give any errors out from MySQL by default. So MySQL connect, and we put in our MySQL host, our MySQL user, and our MySQL password. If it doesn't connect, so if we're not connecting, remember we're silencing this, we are going to throw new server exception, and then we're going to specify an error message. So I'm going to just say could not connect to server. Now we can say else if, and we can say not, and we're silencing this, MySQL select DB, and again we're connecting to MySQL DB, which we've already specified up here. And if that returns true, so if it's not, if we can't connect, then this will return true. We need to throw a new database exception. Okay, so remember we're catching our server extension and database exception, and for that we're going to specify the message. In fact, we could probably, we'll say could not connect to database, or could not select database. Okay, so now what we've done is we've created two or an if-else if statement, and we have said if we can't connect to MySQL, so if we can't connect to our server using our credentials up here and here, then we want to throw a new server exception, which we've already predefined by extending our exception class to this that we've named ourselves. And we've done exactly the same with database exception. We've extended this class, and we're now dealing with a named class called database exception that we've called ourselves. So we're doing exactly the same thing. We're saying if we can't connect to that, then throw a database exception. Now we can set up each catch and what we want to do for each catch. So if we can't connect to our server, for now we're just going to print out an error message. Obviously you could do whatever you wanted to in here, but I'm just going to demonstrate this with an error. So I'm going to append on the EX variable that we've created from this class, and from that we're going to specify the function getMessage, which will get the message that we specified when we threw the exception. Now what we can do is do exactly the same for our database exception. We can say error and then ex get message. So this means we've now thrown two different exceptions, and we have two different actions for each exception thrown. So you can now see how this can actually be useful in everyday applications. So let's first of all connect to our database. We'll say else echo connected. So let's come into our page and refresh. Now the credentials are fine, so we've been connected. Now let's play around with changing them. So let's change root to Alex, and what this should do is we should throw a new server exception, and we should have the error message could not connect to server. So let's refresh. Error could not connect to server. So that's successful. We've successfully thrown this error. Okay, so let's change that back to root, and now let's say a database 1. So we've appended a 1 on. This database doesn't exist. So now let's refresh, and you can see that we've got an error saying could not select database. So what we've done in this tutorial is we've extended the exception class to two classes of our own. So we're using parts of this exception class for ourselves, and by doing this, what we've done, by defining them here, what we've done is we've been able to throw two different exceptions. By naming the classes ourselves, we've created a custom name for our exception. So we've duplicated this exception class. Essentially, that's what we've done. We've connected to our database, which you should know how to do, and you should now know this works. So if we don't connect, we throw a new exception. Otherwise, if we don't connect to our database, we throw a new exception as well. Otherwise, we say that we're connected successfully, and we've got our catch blocks down here which give out an error, just as an example. But otherwise, you could choose to take an action depending on which exception has been thrown. So take this, play around with it, see what you can do with it, and see how you can apply it to your own applications. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is another video for the New Boston. Now we've already looked at our custom server and database exceptions. Now what we're going to be looking about is coming into our extended classes here, but taking some information and outputting some useful information. So what we've done is we've created errors in root and a database. So I've changed root to Alex, and what that's done is if we refresh, we're saying could not connect to server. And if we are changing a database and appending a 1 on, we're saying could not select database. Now what I want to do is give a more specific error. So I want to say what line it's on and what file it is from. So again, this may be a useless example, but you can understand then the concept of everything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, and we are just going to echo out a custom error message depending on our server exception and database exception. And we're going to be changing these functions names in a bit when we've redefined them. So up here at the moment we've got nothing within our brackets, but if I pull these down, we can start to define custom functions inside, or methods rather, because obviously in object-oriented programming, which this is part of, we are looking at methods. We're calling them methods. So what we can say is we can say public function, we can say show specific, and again we're going to create a block inside this as well. So here is going to be our error message. So what this is going to do is it's going to echo out, in fact no, it's going to return, and what we want to return is first of all the line number that we find the error on, and then the file itself that we're actually in, which is going to be index.php. So we want to return this. We use this. It's not a defined variable that I've defined anywhere. This just means this in general here. This, and we're going to say get line. Okay, get line. So we can make it look a bit more user friendly. Error on line something. So this line here. And then we're going to say append on some more text in this get file. So now what our error is going to read is error on line, and we're appending on the line that this error has been thrown on. So error, we'll say thrown. Oh, to make a bit more sense. So error thrown on line something in this file. Okay, so let's just test that, and then we'll create another one for the database exception as well. So at the moment, if we refresh, it looks like we're connected absolutely fine. So we need to change this. Remember here, this currently says get message, and that's echoing out this message here. So let's delete these, and we'll purposely create a server error. We'll see what happens. Nothing. Oh yeah, okay. So it's because we want this function show specific. We want to take that from our exception that we've thrown. So we're going to say show specific. Okay. So now let's refresh. Okay, so we're showing that an error has been thrown on line 21 in, and then we echo the file name out. So our custom error message where the exception has been thrown is successful. So it reads error thrown in line something in. So let's just double check everything. I know the file name's fine because we can see that here. We're working with index.php, even though it wasn't previously shown, but there we are. So we're error thrown on line 21. Let's go and have a look to see where the error has been thrown. So the throw new server exception is on this line here, and you can see that down here in the corner it's line 21. So we're successfully showing the right information. So now what we can do is do the same thing for database exception. We can create a public function show specific, and we can do exactly the same thing. So we can return error thrown on line, and then we say this get line. Okay, so remember this get line here and this get file here is a method within exception. However, because we're extending this, we're actually putting it into use in our server exception, which we've called ourselves, or named ourselves rather. So this dot get line, and then we append on in, and then we append onto that this get file. Okay, so now that should do exactly the same thing. Let's return this to root, so we don't throw an error for that. And remember, we need to change this to show specific. Okay, so let's change our database information. So we throw an error for this. Refresh, and now it says, oh, we've missed out a little space there. Let's pop a space in there to make it neat. So we've got error thrown on line 25 in the same file, obviously. So let's go to line 25 and check where the error has been thrown, or the exception has been thrown rather. It's this line here, which is database exception. So you've probably guessed that the line that is thrown out is 25. So you can see that by extending our exception class, we can create our own methods inside to use data from our exception class. There's much more than this. If you go on the PHP manual, you'll be able to find a lot more methods inside and properties that you can take from this exception class and put it into your own. And then we've thrown our exceptions ourselves using catch twice while we're throwing twice. So that's how you're going to extend your exception class, and how you're going to catch multiple exceptions with your own custom error message. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another PHP video tutorial. Now in this tutorial I'm going to be briefly introducing you to what object-oriented programming is, and also why it's more useful to use. In our case, we're going to be programming in object-oriented programming in PHP. So object-oriented programming, also noted as OOP, you've probably seen it more commonly written as OOP, is a different way to program within many languages, not just PHP. We've got PHP in languages such as C#, Java, and just to name a couple. So why do we use object-oriented programming? Now, usually in a PHP script you would use a procedural way of coding, so you would write your code, maybe include a couple of functions from top to bottom. Now, object-oriented programming takes use of objects in your program, so you will have different objects inside of your program which will allow you to access them in different ways. So if you think about object-oriented programming, if you think of your whole application, or your code if you like, as a whole object, you have smaller objects inside that you can deal with. For example, you may have a bank account. We may have a class, but we'll go into classes later, so if you don't know what a class is, just follow along the example. You may have a class called bank account, and inside this bank account, this will be relative to, say, a specific user. You might have a balance and some more information. Now, what happens if you want to automatically update this balance by calling this object and telling it what to do? Now, inside of this object, you will have, or this class if you like, you will have different methods. So the methods will update things. So we could have a method called update balance, or more realistically, deposit funds, and then we could have, say, withdraw funds. So the deposit funds will take in a parameter, let's say 10, and we'll add 10 to our balance. So this is a bit of a bad way of representing it, but when you get into your object-oriented programming, and you start to write the code, you'll start to understand how actually easy it is once you've got around the basics. So why do we learn object-oriented programming? Well, for the reasons I've already described. Your code is a lot better organized. Object-oriented programming has been part of PHP since PHP 5 was released. I'm not sure when that was. I think it was a good sort of 5 odd years ago. And not a lot of people do actually use it. They still use the same procedural code, which I do. I mean, I do a lot of the time as well. However, it's a good practice to get into learn object-oriented PHP and start to get into this practice, because you're going to reap the many benefits from this as you can. So like I said, object-oriented programming is a better way to program in general. You have just part of the structure of it. Like I said, you have classes. You'll then have properties of each class. So this could be, say, like I said with the bank account example earlier, the property could be the balance. And then you have methods. So the methods are things that do things. So methods are essentially functions. Properties are essentially variables that you would store data in. However, we have lots of other aspects of object-oriented programming, that we can look at in order to work out how it's useful. For example, we have things like the extends keyword. You can see that my text editor has highlighted it blue. Extends creates a new class, but adapts and takes properties and methods from another class. So we can have a main top level class, but then we can have classes underneath it that extend data from that class. So we can take things like that bank account example, and we can extend another class with different information, but still using the balance from there. So you'll find that lots of complex code written properly will use object-oriented programming. I've just shown you a few examples. However, we're going to crack on in the next examples of creating the code rather than talking about it. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it, but we're going to get straight in and do everything by example, so you can understand where and when OOP is useful. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and welcome back to another PHP tutorial for the New Boston. In this video we're going to be looking at object-oriented programming, and I'm just briefly going to be explaining and demonstrating classes, properties and methods. So we're just going to be outlining a structure of a class that we're going to create. So a class is like our object. We can do things with it, and we can store different things inside of it. We can also use we can also interact other objects with other objects. So for now, let's just focus on creating a class, creating some property, or creating a property and a method inside of this class. We're not going to be able to do anything with it at this point, but this should give you an insight on the skeleton outline of creating a class. So the first thing we do is use the class keyword, and we need to give our class or our object a name. So I'm going to call this bank account. And you'll see that I've created it much like a function. So I've got some parentheses in here, and I've got some curly brackets. In fact, my mistake, we don't actually need these parentheses in here. That's for the methods when we do declare our methods inside of our class. So we've created our class now. Let's go over to our browser and refresh. Obviously nothing's happened at this point because we don't have any properties or methods inside of our class, but we also don't have any output, so there's no way at the moment we're outputting everything. I'm just going to be refreshing to make sure that we don't have any errors as we go along. So now we've created our class. This class is called bank account. So we've got a class called bank account. Now inside we might want to specify some different properties inside of our class. Now properties are much like variables. We can create them either variable so that we can change things within inside our class, so we can change the properties of our class, or we can create them static, so we can create a static variable that won't change. So for things like static variables, you'd want to say things like the value of pi in mathematics, or for a variable you'd want to say the balance of a bank account. So I'm going to use this example in here. We are going to create a variable, and then I'm going to tell you how we need to change this to either to change the type of the property. So let's say balance, and at the moment we'll equal it to 0. Let's say this bank account has just been opened. So balance equals 0. Now there's something we need to add in the front, and this is either a public, a protected, or a private. So we change the visibility of this variable. Now public means that this can be accessed anywhere inside of your code. Protected means it can only be accessed within your class itself, so methods can access it. And private means that it can't be accessed outside of the class whatsoever. So protected and private are somewhat similar, but we'll be going into the differences between them and why we should use them a bit later on. So for now I'm just going to create the balance as public so we can use it outside of our class just for example purposes. So now what we've done is we've successfully created our class, and we've successfully created a property within our class, and this property is called balance, and it's equal to 0. So we've created an integer variable which is a property of bank account. So we have a bank account, and our balance now is 0 for this bank account. So let's say under here, we're not going to do this now, but we wanted to create a new bank account for someone. As soon as we create a new instance of this class, what we've automatically done is set the balance to 0, and the methods are going to allow us to do things like show the balance and deposit and withdraw funds. So let's go up here and let's create a new method. Now a method is structured somewhat like a function, however we also give it a public, protected or private keyword. So I'm going to create this public as well. I'm going to say public, and we create it exactly like we would do a function. So we want to say, public, and then we say function. Now we give a name to our function as we usually would with procedural PHP. So public function, and let's go for display balance. We do exactly the same with the parentheses at the end, and then our curly brackets or curly parentheses. Now in here what we can do is we can the idea of display balance would be to display the balance of the bank account. So what we've done in this tutorial is we've looked at our overall class, so at the object bank account, which we can later on reference and say, yeah, this is a new bank account, create this into a variable, and then we can start doing things with this. And we can create a few instances of this, because all we need to do is set each instance of this class bank account into a new variable, and then we can reuse the code. So you'll start to see later on how useful this can actually be. But for now, we're going to be using this bank account example, and we're going to create our methods and change our balance dynamically as we call different methods inside of this class. So this is the overall structure of a basic object. We've got an object called bank account, which is a class, and we've got a balance inside, which is a property, and we've got a method called display balance. So as long as you understand these terms, later on when you learn, you'll pick up a lot quicker, because you'll understand what these methods are, what these properties are, and what a class is overall.